Early. Just put your name. You're the only chance.
Right. I'd like to call this meeting to order, the September 5th Planning and Zoning Commission. Can I get a roll call of commission members, please?
Commissioner Helfrey,
Here.
Commissioner Rubus,
Here.
Commissioner Cohn,
Here.
Commissioner Broyles,
Here.
Commissioner Clayton,
Here.
Commissioner Zeppler, Commissioner Jackson,
Here.
Chair Beatty,
Here.
Councilmember Brost,
Here.
and Mayor Boland.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. So tonight on the agenda, we have two public hearings, two information reports, two correspondence items, and two other items. Can I get an approval of the minutes from August 7th, please? Motion by Commissioner Helfrey, seconded by Commissioner Cohn. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, motion carries with one abstention. Thank you. Does the Department of Planning have any opening comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and maybe Mayor Boland would like to do the introduction. We have a new commission member tonight, so Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Joe. I would like to introduce Jim Rubus from Ward 7. He has served on various capacities with our city. He's done an exceptional job. I'm confident he's going to do a great job here, and I just want to personally thank him for his service and stepping to the plate. So welcome. Glad to have you.
All right. Appreciate you volunteering. Let's see here. All right. All right. At this time, we'll open the floor for public comment. As a reminder, each person wanting to speak will have 3 minutes. And I was donated this bell by one of our attendees tonight that I will ding when there is 1 minute remaining. Travis, do you have any speaker cards?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, the first speaker card is Ms. Link. Mr. Chair, that was Lynn Link.
Ms. Link?
Or do you want me to? I am Lynn Link and I live at 4028 Indian Ridge. And I'm going to be speaking in opposition to the TB and the McBride developments. The history of this land shows a high probability of dangerous toxins in the soil, including arsenic, lead, nickel, cadmium, and even asbestos. The proposed development will require every inch of the soil to be disrupted, increasing water runoff causing soil contaminants to spread to adjacent properties and water sources downstream. Demolition of the existing homes built from the 1940s to the 1970s, when asbestos fibers were ingredients in most brick, masonry, mortar, insulation, and adhesives, will cause asbestos fibers to become airborne for up to 48 hours, causing health risk to all nearby residents. Wildwood's industrial past is well documented, with the story of Glencoe Lime being the largest producer of lime and concrete appearing on Wildwood's Facebook page. The 1878 and 1909 plat maps show that this parcel was part of the 78-acre farm of Anton Dutchman. Arsenic lead was routinely used in farming from the 1890s through the 1950s. 100 years ago, Wildwood looked very different because of deforestation of lumber as well as intense industry. The 1878 plat map shows a large portion directly south of this parcel was owned and operated by Christie Parks for lime and clay mining using coal and wood fire kilns. The 1909 plat map shows that by then, a large portion of the land to the south was owned and operated by Glencoe Lime and Cement, which mined lime and operated kilns to the 1930s. To the north was approximately 800 acres and owned and operated by Centaur Lime, which was in operation till the 1970s. Just west down Manchester Road was Winkle Terracotta Manufacturing, and directly across from it was Sterling's Hydraulic Press Brick Manufacturing and Kiln. Coal and wood fire kilns for brick and lime manufacturing, in addition to hydrogen chloride, dioxin furans emissions, spew heavy metals such as lead, cadmium, nickel, and mercury and arsenic into the air, eventually contaminating soils where they may lay dormant until disrupted. Lead emissions of cars fueled with lead gasoline from the 1930s to the 80s on nearby roadways is also a concern. When I lived in Oakville, I brought up to county zoning and planning the potential risks of toxins on a residential development on a former nursery site. Payne Family Homes then decided not to build there. Shortly thereafter, McBride Barra built Gray Oak subdivision on that same site. Your job is to keep us safe from companies who would put profit over the safety of Wildwood residents. I request that the results of soil testing, along with the map and schematic and the EPA license number of the certified testing facility be made public. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next.
And the next speaker card is Vicky Robluski.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak regarding
Name
that.
and address, please.
I'm Vicky Rubleski, President of the Board of the Homeowners Association for Windsor Crest. I live at 17227 Windsor Crest in Ward 1. And tonight I'm representing the residents of Windsor Crest, some of whom are here tonight. On August 9, 2021, the Town Center Plan update was approved as an ordinance by City Council. On page 15, it reads as follows under the heading Summary of the Major Recommendations by Town Center Update Team. First sentence, the Town Center Update Team unanimously approved the adoption of these changes to the plan. Number one, under order of decisions list, endorsed all existing alleys in Town Center to become public and all future alleys to be platted as public. Planning and zoning approved it on June 7, 2021, and the Town Center Update Team initially approved the alleys in the plan at a meeting on April 18, 2019. Since Jim Van Ness, our previous board president, was contacted by the Town Center Update Team almost 4 years ago to ask if there was interest in us having our alleys public, we assumed when the ordinance was passed that we just needed to sign the legal document to transfer the alleys to the city. After becoming board president, I contacted the City Hall in October 2022, a year later, to ask about the paperwork. I was told there was no plan to transfer the alleys and was referred to the policy on the public dedication of private streets. When I reviewed the policy, it predated any alleys in Wildwood and did not address our situation. That prompted public comment at the Admin Public Works Committee and City Council for wording changes to the policy. Almost a year later, we would like to ask the Planning and Zoning Commission to move forward again with your approval tonight based on the following factors. According to the wording in the Town Center Plan update passed into ordinance on August 9, 2021, our residents believe the alleys were made public at that time. Windsor Crest Alleys meet the criteria listed in the policy. They were originally built to meet city street standards for depth with water drainage and signage, so they meet street criteria. Proper notifications of residents under the policy has been made, and in that process, we also ask for residents to approve and had signatures, 100% of the homeowners that we were able to reach, and had 70 of 77 that we were able to reach out to. And then finally, the homeowners association has continued to maintain the alleys since the ordinance passed, providing mowing, mulching, fertilizing, and watering for the roadway along Highway 109. In exchange, the city provides snow removal for our alleys, so partial maintenance has already occurred in transition. And finally, we just ask for you to support this to move forward tonight, since the recommendation from planning and zoning is to approve the petition. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chair, the next speaker card is from Mr. Comer.
My name's Tim Comer. I live at 2460 Atherton Road. I'm here tonight to oppose the Tony Bosworth TB development. My property borders this development. I can tell you that I've lived here for 26 years. Never in my mind did I ever think that the city of Wildwood would even imagine entertaining a thought of putting this kind of density anywhere near where I live. I chose to live here for the peace and quiet. And these were all 1 to 3 acre lots when I moved in. Over the years, the city has, I wouldn't say sneakily, but they changed the zoning, and that they're kind of responsible for this, and it shouldn't be allowed, period. If you look at the plans, this builder wants to build 2 feet. He wants to put these buildings 2 feet away from my property line. Okay, there's a slight slope that runs from Crestview all the way down through every yard. My yard takes the biggest pitch. Over the last 20 years, I've lost 6 inches of soil in the middle of my backyard, just the way it sits. So imagine when you put up 58 of these buildings, 8 houses per acre, almost no green space. How are you going to do that? 2 feet, 2 feet. So when the rainwater runs off of these roofs, 2 feet, it's all coming to me. I've submitted pictures to Joe Vunich the way it sits now. Every time it rains, I have a 6-foot path of water that runs in both sides of my yard. It's not been a problem. I knew my neighbors for my whole life. One of them was a relative. My immediate next door neighbor, I knew all my life. We went to church together. It wasn't an issue because she was my neighbor. It's the way neighbors act. And then this builder came, wanted to make a bunch of money and build 58 homes right there on 6.9 acres. Are you kidding? Would any of you want that kind of invasion of your privacy? Think of every street dead ends to my backyard. I will see every light. I will hear every peep of noise. And I don't think any one of you sitting up there tonight could honestly say, please build this next to me. I know you wouldn't, Mr. Bolin, because you like your privacy. We all already know that. So I can tell you, when you vote tonight, you vote with your heart. You vote if you would want this next to you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chair, the next speaker card is from Ms. Parson.
Good evening. My name is Julie Parsons and I live at 2425 Atherton Road in Wildwood, and I'm here to speak against the Latitude 38 development. My opposition is the density and rental housing that is too dense for this area. That is a lot of homes in a very small area. Also, as I read through the Department of Planning's information report, It indicates that units 1 and 2 are intended to accommodate all the accessibility and ADA requirements for the purpose of the project of this size. And I'm wondering if the developer is seeking some kind of community block grant, some kind of grant money that this requirement is being put in here. And if so, will that open the project up to low-income housing or Section 8 housing? Just maybe would like that explained to us. Also, there's beautiful trees over there. There's a lot of discussion about all the trees, and a lot of people moved to Wildwood because they love the trees and the open area. And in the plan, it lists 45 trees and has 22 of those trees are listed as grand trees, and it says that they will all be removed. I think that's wrong. Also, in attachment B, under conditions, under the stormwater improvements, it states that the proposed retention, detention facilities and related stormwater improvements shall be located in common area and ensure perpetual maintenance to the homeowners association. If this is a rental project, I don't understand how there'd be a homeowners association. So maybe we could get some explanation on that too. So that's all I have tonight. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chair, the next speaker card is Mr. Bosworth.
Good evening. I'm Tony Bosworth with TB Realty and Development. Good evening. Thanks for being here on this Tuesday night. Just wanted to briefly bring up a couple things. First of all, when we first brought this project to Town Center Update, to the Development Zoning and Review Committee, we were 65 units. Through some meetings with staff, we're now 58 units. When we brought this officially before this board, we were 62 units. In the report, there's things like light spillage that were brought up. We have addressed that in the landscape plan. In this plan, you can see one of the big things we did is we created a kind of a boulevard entry into the main entrance, which is on the top of the plan there. The second thing is the stormwater detention, which you note there. We created a pathway through the site from west to east that goes all the way through down to the detention area. Another item that was brought up in the report is the light spillage on the site. And then Mr. Comer also brought up, we can see in the area where the streets end, the terminus of the streets, we have landscape buffers that has been designed by Loomis Associates, our architect, I believe the city's architect as well. I'm not going to go through all this. I don't want to take the time, but these are all the things that got addressed with staff. One thing that Mrs. Parsons brought up was the handicap spaces or the handicap units. Under the law, we have to provide 2 fully handicapped units, and those are the units required. There's no special or consideration for subsidized housing. Also, we have taken into consideration one of the city's concerns and also the neighbors' concerns with regard to control of the site and is it going to be maintained in the future. We have offered to staff, as we will have a homeowners association just like any of the other subdivisions around. And as part, that'll be a 5-person board. And we have offered the city to have a staff member, a non-elected official on that board in the future if they would like. We've modified our street plan. These would be the units fronting on Crestview Main Street. Just a matter of reference. Again, I'll leave it so you guys have copies of this in your report. And in summary, we just like to do the best we can to cooperate with you guys. We've reduced the density, and I'll be available to answer any questions you guys may have when the time comes up. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your comments.
The next speaker card is Ms. Babb.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Frances Babb, 2001 Kursdale Court in Clarkson Valley, Missouri. I'm here to speak on the solar application that Alabar and Caitlin have submitted, give you some additional information about that. When it comes to major developments like the N38 project, Crestview, and McBride projects, you guys give the impression, and I don't know how true this is, but you give the impression that you will bend over backwards with the attitude, how can we make this work and work out for everyone in the best possible way? But when it comes to solar energy projects, it appears, keyword here appears, to be the exact opposite. How can we not make this work? In the case of Caitlin and Alabar, they applied for a solar energy permit on November 23rd of last year for 18.6 kilowatt system. 51 365 watt panels with microinverters and battery backups, with half of the panels being on the front of the roof and half of the panels being on the back of the roof. And they came with HOA approval. There is another solar home with much more visible solar panels in their same subdivision. They are 140 feet from the curb, 36 feet below grade. They have 3.65 acres and mature vegetation. So who is going to see this system from the abutting street? And who is going to be negatively impacted by it? The recommendation that I read on your website shows that you are agreeable to 41 out of the 51 panels that they are wanting to install. And the logic is that that will create a nice rectangle on their asymmetrical surface. Anyway, 365 watt panels, and 51 of them is 18.6 kilowatts, but 41 panels at the same kilowatts or same wattage is 15 kilowatts. So if they really needed 18.6 kilowatts, they're going to need a good 455 watt panel. And on the manufacturer's website, they're no longer selling 365 watt panels anymore. The highest wattage that the manufacturer from Germany has is 510 watts. Now, at 510 watts, you're going to be paying out the nose for panels of that, efficiency. Anyway, what is frustrating me, and my last comment here, is that why is it that it has taken since November to come up with this rectangle idea? Fair enough.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chair, the next speaker card is from Ms. Gillespie.
Hello, Megan Gillespie. I live at 17002 Main Street in Wildwood. Here to oppose the Crestwood Development Project. We've talked in the last city council meeting, I believe it was even brought up as related to the McBride development, that there has to be an attempt to preserve the grand trees. I don't see that on here. If you either preserve them, and this is my understanding, I would like some clarity here. You either preserve them or you go back in with something very large, which would, from the description that I heard, sounds like it's going to take like a tree spade to do it. I don't think when you hear somebody say, oh, we've got landscaping going in, what they mean in a development context is typically like a 2-inch diameter honey locust tree, which is a street tree. Those are not going to turn into grand trees. They're not actually going to replace the green space. They're actually intended to turn over. They grow quickly. And when you have a street tree like that, the reason that you have to have that kind of turnover and something that grows fast is because it can't ever expand its root zone out to sufficiently support a large tree. So it's going to die. It's going to die in like 5 to 10 years. And you want to kind of get them kind of continually turned over. So when they say landscape, they don't mean landscape like what we've got now with the big trees in there. So I would request that this group take a good hard look at that plan and make sure that we're actually sticking to the rules that you guys decided on before. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chair, the next speaker card is from Ms. Donaldson.
Hi, my name is Debbie Donaldson. My address is 17016 Canberry Lane. And I'm several of the people that I know that live in Canberry. We are questioning who will be responsible for completing Crestview Drive and at what cost. In order to have a dialogue with the commissioners, I will ask that one of you make a motion to suspend Robert's Rules of Order and another to second this. Therefore, those of us who will be the most impacted by this development will gain better clarity, something we lack. We keep asking about that, and we're not getting substantial answers. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
No one's going to suspend Robert's Rules of Order?
Well, Mr. Chairman, we can let our city attorney reply to this, but it's not a matter of Robert's Rules of Order. It's a matter of the legality of these proceedings, Mr. Young.
That is correct.
So the answer is no.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the department has no further speaker cards for the general public comment session.
All right. Thank you. So in that case, we'll move on to our public hearings. In the city of Wildwood, public hearings are truly intended to accept comments and questions concerning these posted items. Since these requests are being presented at a public hearing, no action is planned on these items tonight, and consideration of them is to be taken no earlier than the October 2023 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. This approach ensures the members of the commission will hear all opinions before taking any action. The city's Department of Planning will address the comments, questions, and concerns that are raised tonight and include them as part of its formal recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Anyone in attendance at City Hall tonight wanting to speak should fill out a speaker's card and leave it with Mr. Newberry. Those in attendance via the Zoom webinar platform should use the raise hand feature to indicate you wish to speak at these hearings. A team member will add you to the list of speakers, which will then be communicated to me as chair, and I will invite you to speak when it is your turn. The public hearing process is outlined in the public hearing guidelines pamphlet, which can be found on the table at the entryway to the council chambers. These guidelines are also provided on tonight's online meeting agenda. The commission will allow all parties adequate time to present their position. As outlined in the public hearing guidelines pamphlet, speakers who are designated as a group speaker representing more than 5 individuals will be allocated 5 minutes to speak. Those individuals representing themselves will be allocated 3 minutes to speak. In addition, information on these items can be found at the city's website at www.cityofwildwood.com. The commission would like to thank you for your cooperation and participation in tonight's hearings. Mr. Newberry, PZ 18-23.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. PZ 18-23, City of Wildwood Planning and Zoning Commission, care of Department of Planning, 16860 Main Street, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040. A request for the consideration of modifications to the city's code of ordinances, specifically to chapter 415.030 definitions and chapter 415.090 in non-urban residence district, section C, conditional land use and development permits issued by the commission, which would allow for the addition of a new conditional type use to the existing list of them for the purpose of allowing agriculture, research and development activities as a function of a rural land use setting, along with corresponding definition of the same, all wards.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vunich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, recently, the city administrator, representatives of Ward 6, and the Department of Planning met with representatives of the owner of the Farmer Farr greenhouse property. That group, Solus, has purchased the greenhouse and property and are utilizing it for retail wholesale operations relative to plantings, but also have expanded into research and development, which is a key component of their business performa or profile. As part of that discussion, they began to describe that based upon current patterns, the wholesale component may no longer exist after the end of the year. but they have a desire, that being the current owners of the property, to proceed forward with greater use of the property for research and development activities relative to agricultural background. Therefore, during that discussion, it led to a decision to proceed forward and consider agricultural, but under the heading of research and development activities as a possible conditional use in the NU non-urban resident district. In this particular case, the department does not believe this may be just a single incident, so to speak, based on this property. And that is because of the large lot development pattern that does exist in a great amount of area of the city of Wildwood, where already agricultural and agricultural related activities do exist. Additionally, there is a plentiful and appropriate housing stock for scientists or those that might be drawn to this area for the purposes of research and development. There's also a well-educated population here. And then finally, this community has many of the assets that research and development activities seek for their employees, that being our public trail system, all the public space, town center, et cetera. So again, not to the degree that I've described it, but this is a request for consideration of a new conditional use based upon an existing operation that has been in place, at least for greenhouse, since 1953, I believe, and that the new owners would like to continue forward using the property, but for a different type of purpose. Therefore, tonight, the department has prepared information for your consideration. And again, most importantly, to hear from the public about the potential benefits or concerns relative to this type of conditional use. If there are any questions of the department or the city attorney, we'd be glad to take them at this time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Vernich. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. I do have a speaker card. No. Mr. Snyder.
Thank you very much. My name is Dustin Snyder. I am the COO of Solus Agrosciences Incorporated. I'm currently joined today by longtime former owner of Far Greenhouse, part of the Solus Agrosciences company, Pat Belrose as well. Just want to explain kind of what we do, our intentions with the Far Greenhouse site, and kind of what brought us today as it relates to this new conditional use. Solus Agrosciences is a new company just founded last year with the intention of supporting innovators in the agriculture space bring their ideas to life. We provide end-to-end agriculture research pipeline capabilities, including plant transformation, gene editing, plant growth, plant assays, and a bunch of other mostly laboratory offerings. Our research labs and our offices are actually located in the Helix Biotech Incubator, which is in Creve Coeur. Solus came to FAR about 6-7 months ago, primarily in search of protected growth areas, greenhouses. We ultimately found with that operation an owner in Pat Belrose that shared our vision of sustainable agriculture through innovation. Mr. Belrose has exercised innovation in his operation, being a pioneer in everything from sustainable potting mixes to energy efficient greenhouse heating alternatives. It has always been Solus's intention to transition the Far Greenhouse operation to research and development purposes in service of our clients, all the while employing many of the practices that have been the cornerstone of Mr. Belrose's business these many years. To date, we've converted 5,000 of approximately 55,000 square feet of greenhouses for R&D purposes. That includes things like conventional breeding methods where we're crossing plants like corn and soy inside the greenhouse, to growing agricultural crops for seed increases for plant crop producers. In all cases, it's been our assumption that we were engaged in an agriculture operation within the city ordinances. I'd just like to mention one other thing. All of our research on that site is conducted within greenhouses, and all of our lab activities are in Creve Coeur at our main offices. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chair, that was the only speaker card for this item and no one on Zoom has indicated they wish to speak.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the commission? Commissioner Helfrey?
Mr. Vunish, I just am looking for a little bit of clarity. Is this going to be something that you're looking for to apply a CUP that would be allowed to be applied to any agriculture in the future? Does that made sense in here?
Yes, ma'am. I think I understand the question, and under the current regulation is agricultural activity must be conducted on a 5 acre or greater size lot. So that's the first kind of filter that any agricultural activity would have to meet to be considered favorably. Also, as part of the advertisement tonight, there is a request to develop a definition if the commission would like to proceed forward with this ultimately. And that definition would set other standards or requirements, much like we do for commercial vehicles in the definition section of the zoning ordinance. So for the most part, if the commission were to support this and ultimately city council approve it, we would have a new conditional use that would be required to meet the agricultural components of the non-urban resident district, but also a new definition that would give clarity to what can or cannot happen.
Mayor Boland?
So to the extent we can, I would recommend we bifurcate those and keep, I'm not speaking against visiting the definition necessarily, but I think out of deference to the petitioner in this case, keeping them separate and having the CUP handled first, and then separately we address as a body the issue of whether we want to do a more macro approach in terms of the definition might be advisable, because I'm afraid we do them together, it could end up having relevancies and irrelevancies considered that in respect to one or the other that may not need it.
I appreciate the suggestion, and I think it's appropriate. The hope is to kind of introduce the concept of a new conditional use with an associated definition. And then at the October meeting, actually have the public hearing on the activity itself, so that we could get a jump start on one and then catch the other one up. So I concur. Thank you for the comment.
Commissioner Harubis?
Is the intent of the petitioner to have, he's using the greenhouses, but further on to bring labs to the place? This would strictly be R&D out.
I'm assuming the petitioner's representative shook his head in the affirmative.
Yeah, Commissioner Jackson.
I was just saying, we approved not too long ago the expansion of a landscaping company, if you will. They bought extra land and they were going to do, and we approved it. How is the existing any different from this? I mean, why couldn't we just approve this similar to what we did for that? They're not commercial, they're not selling. That's what I'm trying to figure out why.
In the case that you referenced, where the Planning and Zoning Commission supported not only fixed supply services to expand, but Kurt's Nursery to start a new business in Wildwood, those were both in industrial settings and industrial zoning. Here, the dog that wags the tail is the NU non-urban resident district. And so that's why we have to be cautious, and the conditional use permit process is that caution.
Thank you, Crystal.
Are there any further questions or comments? All right, seeing none, motion to close the public hearing. Motion by Commissioner Helfrey, seconded by Commissioner Clayton. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, any abstain? All right, public hearing is closed. Thank you. Next, Mr. Newberry, PZ 19-23.
PZ 19-23, City of Wildwood Planning and Zoning Commission, care of Department of Planning, 16860 Main Street, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040. A request for the consideration of modifications to the city's code of ordinances, specifically chapter 415.450 outdoor lighting requirements, which would add additional regulations to address aesthetic lighting sources that create a nuisance glare, loss of night sky, or trespass, inclusive of a low voltage types, given such is currently less regulated of all the luminaires that are currently identified therein, all wards.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vinich.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the commission, the department has prepared for your consideration tonight a proposed request to develop additional regulations for low voltage type of lighting sources. At this time, the city does have outdoor lighting requirements and has had those requirements for many, many years. However, when initially adopted, low voltage lighting was not necessarily the key component or an area of substantial regulation, because primarily it's used for landscaping purposes, building lighting for architectural considerations, and et cetera. In the primer, the department notes that low voltage lighting now, due to the use of LEDs, has become more prevalent and in many instances throughout or comprehensively used throughout our residential and commercial areas. That low voltage lighting, for the most part, works okay, but in instances of late, we're seeing not only glare and trespass, but the loss of night sky due to glow. Therefore, the thought was not only to address those concerns, but also just the placement and the length of time certain low voltage lighting may be used, for example, holiday types. So therefore, tonight, the department is seeking input on this particular matter and ultimately will prepare for the Planning and Zoning Commission's consideration a recommendation in this regard. As with the previous public hearing, if there are any questions the commission has at this time, the city attorney, Mr. Newberry, and I'd be glad to answer them. Otherwise, obviously, we would like to hear from the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vinich. All right. Do you have any speaker cards, Mr. Newberry?
The department hasn't received any speaker cards, no.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Bullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I would recommend that we have the department examine this and come back to the commission with potential changes. Just for your information, you may be aware that we have a couple of apartment projects just on the eastern edge off of Highway 100 in our city. And one of the things that personally I'm very proud of is that a lot of what Mr. Vinich called light pollution that we see up and down Highway 100, we have not allowed in our beautiful city of Wildwood. And just imagine, if you will, if every balcony in the apartment buildings that have abutting Highway 100 strewn these lights all year long, as they could conceivably do under our current rules. So that is not a look that I think our residents would want. And I think it would detract significantly from our city. And I would definitely recommend that the department consider these items and come back to the commission with potential changes to eliminate and ameliorate that potential effect. Thanks.
All right. This is just a public hearing. Any other questions or concerns or comments?
Mr. Chair, with your permission, unless there is a direction to the contrary, the department will prepare what it believes are appropriate regulations with the assistance of the city attorney to address the circumstances that the mayor's mentioned, as well as just the trespass and glare components that are also problematic in many instances of late. Thank you.
All right. Motion to close the public hearing. Motion by Commissioner Broyles. Second by Commissioner Helfrey. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Public hearing is closed. All right. Mr. Newberry, PZ 8 and 8A-23.
Mr. Chair, with your permission and the commission's concurrence, could we just read the titles as we've done in the past with some of the more lengthy advertisements?
I am good with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. PZ 8-23 Latitude in 38 TB Realty and Benton Homes, 11605 Stud Avenue, Suite 102, St. Louis, Missouri, 63141. And PZ 8A-23 Latitude in 38 TB Realty and Benton Homes, 11605 Stud Avenue, Suite 102, St. Louis, Missouri, 63141.
All right, Mr. Vinich.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair.
Mhm.
Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the department has prepared for your consideration tonight its information report with recommendation. The recommendation does support the rezoning of the property and the application of the planned residential development overlay district upon it as well. Key to those two recommendations is also a slight change to the regulating plan relative to commercial versus residential, in this case, downtown district to neighborhood general district. Certainly, the department has not been immune to the comments that have been offered not only by the Planning and Zoning Commission during the public hearing process. Again, for 2 months, we had the public hearing open for those comments, but also those that came from the public. The department would first note that in this particular instance, when the town center plan was updated and completed in 2021, this area was changed from downtown district designation, which is the most intense commercial that's available in the town center area, to neighborhood general for the purposes of accommodating future residential growth. The neighborhood general designation from the regulating plan of the town center plan is the most dense that is allowed in terms of units per acre. In this particular instance, the units per acre are at the highest range possible, over 10 units per acre. That's allowed under the designation or land use and the regulating plan of the town center plan. In the report and the associated conditions, I think it's important to note that the density is premised on a maximum number, not a set number. And that maximum number is intended from the perspective of the department because just because 58 units could be accommodated under the proposed plan as submitted, there are all of those issues that have been identified over the course of the last several months. Those referenced issues include the tree preservation and restoration requirements of the city, the outdoor lighting requirements of the city, the stormwater management requirements of the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District and the city, and finally, the public space requirements of the city relative to the site. All of those factors come into play, and in the opinion of the department, will dictate the ultimate number of units that are allowed on this particular site. However, the plan presented tonight does indicate 58. That 58 is in many ways consistent in some regards to projects previously approved in the vicinity, but not identical. The department goes on in the report to identify the issues that have been circulated and discussed and created conditions for the most part to address them. I think one of the most important of those is both a plus and a minus for this particular application, these requests, and that is Main Street. The way Main Street is aligned on the west end at Etherton Road and on the east end here at the terminus by City Hall, this particular set of properties, which ultimately will include the city's Village Green site, has the lion's share of the dedication of land area for the future extension of Main Street. In this particular case, that dedication is approximately 1 acre in size. Obviously, that's a major imposition on any project, but it is a requirement of the proposed recommendation from the department to complete the dedication of land area for Main Street. Also in that recommendation report is requirements for the dedication, which has been mentioned, but also the development of that Main Street. Now, how does that occur? That is a condition of the ordinance. It's the condition of the ordinance for Crestview, the project from McBride Homes. There is an option there for an escrow in both instances. That means the developer would set aside funds to the city for the city to ultimately construct the project itself, Main Street. Or each of the entities could do it. Knowing what we know about Main Street, in that part of Main Street impacts Village Green, we have two different developers working at close timeframes, but not identical timeframes. I think it's important to note that it's probably a city project. The city will pay for a portion of Main Street along Village Green. The developers will pay for a portion of Main Street, either through construction or escrow. And there will be applied to both projects the traffic generation assessment fee. I will tell you, McBride Homes believes between the dedication of land area, the work on Etherton Road to construct comparable improvements to Canberry and Main Street Crossing, they believe that any additional charges for Main Street would be unreasonable and have asked for relief at City Council. I believe the same will be for this particular project by TB Development and Benton Homes. However, there is no relief in the recommendation report. And the department has gone on record in previous meetings saying that these two projects, without the extension of Main Street, would be difficult to support, dependent upon Etherton Road and a small portion of Main Street Crossing. It's integral to the successful development of this project and any other in the vicinity. So tonight, the department is recommending the regulating plan change based upon the action of the Town Center Update Committee and the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. It is also recommending the rezoning and the application of the overlay district for up to 58 units on the property. But at no point should the commission members assume that's a waiver to any of our other requirements relative to lighting, landscaping, tree preservation, grading, etc. All those are contained in the recommendation and the conditions to ensure compliance. So therefore, tonight you have a recommendation for your consideration and action. At this time, the department will conclude its presentation. And if there are any questions regarding the matter, certainly we'll do our best to answer them at this time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Vinich. Any discussion or motion from the commission? Commissioner Cohn?
Questions for Mr. Bosworth? During the public session, there's been a lot of comments about your project. And I have a number of things I'd like to ask. You cannot hear me? Or
I can hear okay.
yeah, okay. First thing that came up was about the environmental impact. In particular, has a phase 1 study been conducted on the property?
Phase 1 study was completed on a portion of the property when I brought it through the first time. It'll be done as part of the site development plan approval in the next phase.
During that phase 1 that was previously conducted, were there any elements that came to surface that were expressed earlier this evening, the arsenic, et cetera, from the lime kiln production and that?
No, the proximity of those locations, if was a little bit misleading, but I won't call the person out. The sites that were referenced are not in proximity to our site.
Okay, so those activities, none of them took place on the property that you proposed to develop.
That is correct.
Also, talking about, there's been a lot of comments about the disparity between owner occupied property and rental property. And to start with, if I may, do you have in mind a range as what to the rents might be on these proposed up to 58 units?
Yeah, we have a range of 2,800 to 3,300 per unit, depending on square footage and number of bedrooms.
You also brought up the homeowners association. So I assume when you both those rental rates, those fees are included in the rental rate, or will those be on top of that?
Those are included in the rental
Those are
rate.
included. When we think about owner occupied versus rental property, one of the first things that comes into mind is just the visual impact as you drive down the street. And so my question is relating to the responsibilities of the HOA, in particular such items, like lawn care, snow removal. What if a window's broken? What if the paint's being starting to fade? Will that also be handled by the HOA?
It will, very similar to Canberry, actually exactly the same as Canberry, both phase 1 and phase 2, and also the project at Taylor and
Right.
Main
So
Street.
to the casual observer, they should not be able to tell the difference between owner occupied or tenant occupied by virtue of the exterior of the premises.
That would be correct.
Okay. Do you intend to have like an on-site property manager?
No, we do not. We'll have a
Be any-
maintenance person available 24/7, but not an on-site, living on-site property.
How are you going to handle property management?
Just the way of the internet these days.
Okay. You also mentioned earlier regarding the HOA that there will be a board of trustees. Those will be, you mentioned, I think maybe a possible member of the city.
Correct. We've
staff,
invited, when we met with staff, we invited the prospect of having a member of staff on
and
that.
the others would be tenants of the property.
We will probably at least have one tenant, possibly two, and then the other two would be ownership.
Okay. What's the minimum term of a lease that you're proposing?
1 year, but I can tell you out of the units we have now, if I get the correct data, I think we have 80% or 2 year or greater. Yeah. 80% or greater than 2 years.
If there's no motion to approve tonight, am I understanding that basically you need to have this type of development approved with this type of density to move forward?
Correct.
Thank you. No further question. I have a question from Mr. Young. If this development is not approved, and Mr. Vunich has also expressed a strong desire for the city, the community to have Main Street complete, am I correct that from a Missouri point of view of law, the city could have the right of eminent domain?
The city always has the right of eminent domain for any public purpose.
With regard to traffic generation assessment, Mr. Vunich, you brought up a fact that McBride Homes has asked for, but not granted, a little relief. The fact that they feel that what they're doing already meets or exceeds their traffic generation assessment. Am I correct that obviously Mr. Bosworth would be required to contribute to that fund? But is it also true that a different developer could also, who is subject to traffic generation assessment, let's say in the same basic area, contribute to that fund and offset what they might be charged for traffic generation assessment?
Yes, in this particular case, there's two TGA, traffic generation assessment fee fund areas, east and west, and Route 109 divides the two areas from each other. So in an instance, let's say that there is another development on the east side of Route 109 that the city believes would be benefited from using their TGA for the purpose of Main Street extension, that can happen.
Thank you. No further question.
Thank you. Commissioner Rubis.
Yes, those are the requirements that the city would expect if city council approves. The developer or developers would meet in constructing and managing and operating the site.
Commissioner Helfrey?
Mr. Vunich, I have a question regarding something that Mr. Comer said earlier this evening. He said his property was right next to this property by 2 feet. And that there would be drainage issues if that was there. So is the city in a position to ensure that this would not impact him in the way that he's concerned that it will? Also, when you were speaking earlier, I try to take a lot of notes, and I think that you said that it would be the tree would be addressed and lighting plans would be addressed. And if I'm reading this correctly, it says that no lighting plan has been submitted. And I don't see any place maybe I'm just missing it about the tree. So those are my 3 questions that I have for you. Mr. Cohen did really good at answering most of the questions that were asked tonight. One of the questions was Mrs. Parsons also asked about the grand trees, and she said that there would be 22 of 45 of the trees would be grand trees. And I'm just curious if we could tell how we want to deal with that. And on my own personal question is, I don't understand how you have an HOA with the rental property. I don't understand that myself, how you have an HOA with the rental property. And I don't see how a city employee would be on that HOA. So that's my list. Thank you.
Well, in terms of the tree preservation and restoration code, it's cited in several instances on page 17 of attachment B. And for the most part, it just says that compliance to ordinance 410, which is the tree preservation and restoration code, is required. Also, it identifies that all areas of preserved vegetation have to be identified on the site development plan and then obviously protected during the construction phase. In terms of the grand trees, we do accommodate removal of grand trees, but there is a formula for their replacement. And that formula takes into account what was there, its size, the species, and what needs to be replaced as best as possible to address the removal. Obviously, the intent is to try to preserve as many grand trees as possible. It's very difficult in town center because we allow commercial activities, which have large parking lots typically, and higher densities for residential purposes, which obviously eliminates a lot of the preserved areas, particularly when we see it in the neighborhood general, which is, again, the land use category that allows the greatest number of units per acre. So we do accommodate removal. We do it through a process of replacement of appropriate types, species, size, and locations. In terms of lighting, if you would turn to page 18, AA lighting requirements, references the outdoors lighting requirements of the city. And again, there's 3 prongs to the regular requirements in this particular instance, and that's preserving the night sky, eliminating glare, which is nuisance, and then trespass. In terms of the HOA, I am not familiar with that approach to the management of units. Obviously, owner-occupied units have HOAs. You probably have all either served on one or discussed something with your HOA regarding your property or another person's property in your subdivision. I would have to defer to either Mr. Levinson or Mr. Bosworth. I believe this may be a model that they've used in St. Charles County in one of their other projects, and they have obviously a greater deal of experience than I in this regard. So from that perspective, hopefully I've answered your questions, or did I miss one?
You did a great job, by the way. I was concerned about Mr. Comer's concerns with it being so close to his property line in drainage.
So on the colorized version of their preliminary development plan, they show a green buffer along the common boundary. And that green buffer, I believe, has a minimum of 10 feet, if not greater in some instances, particularly on the eastern side of the site. From that perspective, there'll be a separation of greater than 2 feet from the closest unit itself. However, grading does go to the boundary line. And that's a concern of the departments and is referenced in its report.
Okay. Then is it okay if we have Mr. Bosworth come up and explain this HOA thing? Please. Thank you, Mr. Vinich.
You're welcome.
Mayor Wallen, real quick. All right, go ahead. Yeah, if you can explain the HOA. I was curious about that as well.
Good evening, Commission. My name is William Levinson, President of Benton Home Builders, 11605 Stutt Avenue, Suite 102, Creve Coeur, Missouri, 63141. Think of this as a single-family subdivision in every way, in that each unit is sitting on its own lot. Each unit has its own tax parcel, gets trash collected, gets mailed to a central mailbox, and their common ground is taken care of through an HOA. The only difference between this is one entity is going to own all the units and rent them instead of having 58 different owners.
Well, I understand that, but my question was, how does an HOA work for a rental unit? Because in a neighborhood, a traditional neighborhood that has an HOA, it's a homeowners association, which means that the homeowners are on the board and take care of the things in the neighborhood. So I just don't understand how that applies to a rental property. That's my question to you.
We are the homeowners, is the way I would,
Okay,
I
so
would
then
answer it.
so then the board is you guys, it's not the people that are renting.
Well, it is us. We will control the board, but we have we have offered a seat to a representative from the city. Also, we like to have tenants involved. If they're long-term tenants that have been there a while and they have a vested interest in keeping the community nice like we do, then we welcome them as well. But we will control the board.
Okay, thank you.
And we will be responsible for all maintenance of common ground.
Commissioner Broyles?
The owners vote and we are the owners. So yes, we vote on how often needs to be mowed, when the mulch needs to be replaced, et cetera. Same, that's the same. We control that. We mow all the yards at the same time. We do all the landscaping. We replace the exteriors when needed. We repair the roofs. We fix the siding, all of that.
So my impression with this is that this will be similar to a new subdivision where the developer basically controls the board until they've sold all the houses. But it'll just stay like that.
That is correct.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Jackson?
I yield to Mayor Boland. He had a question first. Oh, you did.
That's okay. I'll go last. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. For Joe Bunich. We just went through the McBride homes and I know this butts up to it. Refresh my memory, what is the zoning for the McBride homes?
It's identical to this particular request in that it's the R6A 4,000 square foot resident district with the PRD, the overlay district. applied.
Okay, so that's the overlay district and it's neighborhood general, but then down here, it has to be changed to commercial in order for them to rent properties.
Yes, the update of the town center plan that concluded in 2021 wanted to keep a little commercial node down by Village Green to provide services to visitors to the Village Green. But what we're finding anymore is that in town center, we struggle to fill all of the available spaces at a single time. There's a lot of reasons for that, not just city's regulations, but the thought is that why create additional commercial square footage when we have abundant square footage available, and then we have all of Manchester Road, basically from the eastern end of the city to the Pond Historic District.
So if we did not approve commercial, that would prohibit them from renting property. They would have to be single homeowner. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
No, the commercial designation is just for the land use itself.
Okay,
So from that perspective, we don't consider apartments, it is a commercial entity, but it's allowed in a residential zoning district.
okay, I'm good.
You said Commissioner Depler. Commissioner Depler?
Thank you. Yeah, that was one of my questions as well about it. Commercial for rental property. The other question I had, bringing up again the grand trees. It looks like the site is like the perfect example of where you could retain grand trees, because most of the ones that seem to be healthy are around the perimeter of the property. So would there be any chance of, you know, preserving those grand trees that are on the periphery of the property? It would most likely reduce the amount of units that they could have, but at least we could be retaining, you know, some of the character of Wildwood that everybody, you know, is here for with the large trees.
Ms. Depler, I'm sure the developer would prefer to preserve as many of the grand trees as possible based upon what the replacement formula has typically been. It's much, much more expensive in that regard. Also, grand trees add value to a project in the department's opinion. And then finally, as was mentioned in the presentation, the granting up to 58 units is not a guarantee of 58 units when you take into account the regulations the city has relative to tree preservation, stormwater management, et cetera. So at the end of the day,
is the plan that they provided is just a suggestion, and then that it in the next step in the process, we could request that they remove some of those units to preserve trees.
in this particular instance, I think it's obviously a well-engineered plan, or they would have not asked for 58 units. What the department would suggest is that the application of all of the conditions onto the site may ultimately lead to decisions relative to how many units ultimately can be accommodated. And at the end of day, the Planning and Zoning Commission has ultimate authority over the site development plan. There is an appeal process to City Council, but ultimately you'll make the first recommendation, and that typically stands.
Thank you.
Mayor Bullen?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have several questions, and these are in no particular priority. I don't see any, unless I missed it, I didn't see any place in the report that indicated whether these were going to be one story. There's an indication in 2B that the ground level will be required to do something to have certain conditions, but I didn't see, I'm sorry, 2H on the back of so it's the second page of attachment B, first story, interior, clear light, and so forth. But bottom line is, my question is, are these all planned to be one story or more?
In the conditions, the department says they can be no greater than 2 stories. I think the majority of them are ranches based upon the desire to have the parking below the living area of the dwelling. But I would defer to either Mr. Levinson or Mr. Bosworth to give a precise answer.
Okay, thank you. So 1 story or 2 story or 1.5 story?
About 50%. I think it's 31 out of.
Why don't you go to the microphones, because people on the live stream, they won't hear this.
30 of the 58 are 2-story.
Are 2-story?
I'm sorry, 30 are ranch. I apologize. So 28 are 2-story.
How many are 1 story?
30.
30. Okay. And then the rest will be 2-story?
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And then Joe, your question or your statement earlier about the number of units that can be accommodated with the current zoning classification center. And I just, for the public's benefit, and I, what I'm getting ready to say, I'm saying not only for anyone in the audience might be benefiting from it, but particularly from the comments that we got. Most of the written comments indicate to me that there is not a full knowledge out there of the fact that we have 3 different zoning classifications in our city that we've had since its inception. Town center is the first one, and lots by the nature of town center can be just like this, or condensed. Suburban, which is 1 acre minimums, and then non-urban, which is 3 acre. So with that information in mind, back to my question. So they're now proposing 58, and I think you said that that is the maximum allowable, but they were originally proposing 65. So is that not allowable?
Yeah, so just to kind of give you the linkage in the master plan, as the mayor just described, there's 3 principal residential categories: non-urban residential, suburban residential, and town center. In the master plan, in the definition of town center, it basically identifies that the maximum number of units per acre in town center is 11. 58 based upon the net acreage, 58 units based upon the net acreage of the site minus the right of way is over 10 units per acre. So the statement that they're at the maximum, I believe, is correct.
Are they using hardy board?
Yes, the requirement is no vinyl siding, as we've done elsewhere in town center.
Okay. Traffic. How comfortable is the department with respect to assuming this development goes in at the number of units 58 presented tonight? How comfortable is the department that there are not going to be issues relative to traffic and or safety related?
Fairly comfortable based upon conversations with the Department of Public Works, but both the Department of Public Works and the Department of Planning are premising that level of comfort on the fact that Main Street gets extended and connects between Route 109 and current end terminus here at City Hall. And the city proceeds forward with the improvements to Heatherton Road. The benefit to all of this is, regardless of the Crestview project by McBride Homes or this particular project before you tonight, not all of the units will be available at the same time. They'll be developed over a period of time that could be multiple years, which allows, in some regards, us to get the improvements in a reasonable time so as to address the traffic. Saying all of that, we are requiring a traffic impact study to make sure that our assumptions are correct based upon current standards.
And reasonably speaking, is there any concern on the part of the department that the Main Street extension will not go forward, or that the Etherton Road improvements that the city's doing will not?
There's always a concern, as you know, expenditures increase at the city each year due to inflation, and revenue sources have, for the most part, not grown as rapidly as they have in the past. And so it takes a sharp pencil, and the mayor and the city council to ensure that we prioritize those projects where we do spend taxpayers' money. I think the Department of Public Works and the Department of Planning will argue that given what has been authorized or recommended in this area, Main Street and Heatherton Road should be priorities.
So the question, reasonably speaking, you're comfortable that those things, assuming the council and I continue to budget carefully and so forth and spend wisely, that they will proceed?
I believe so. We'll be getting a substantial amount of money through the TGA, the Traffic Generation Assessment Fee. The developers are responsible for a substantial length of Heatherton Road improvements, their frontages. And at the end of day, as they're recommended now, both developers are required to build their portions of Main Street or escrow the amount that would be required to construct.
Right. Relative to the trees, and so the grand tree, that was my deal, proposing that. I'm glad we did it. It's going to be great for the city. It's obviously very important. I assume that this is part of what will come back to the commission if this is approved, but we would obviously want to see, and not just a plan two-dimensionally, I'd like to see proposed elevations as to, and the rule is, and I don't have all the specifics, but basically if you take out a grand tree, you've got to replace it with the largest size tree of the same species that will survive. as you pointed out in your answer to one of your earlier questions, is not an inexpensive proposition, thereby creating incentive to not get rid of the grand trees. But if they do, and they have the right to do that under the code, they have to replace them with that kind of a tree. So if this gets approved, what I'd want to see, and I'm assuming this is already embedded, if not, I'd want to know that, that we would see an elevation for the entirety of the development as to what existing grand trees, where they're going to stay and remain, and what is going to replace them to the extent they get removed, per the requirements of that ordinance. Is that?
It's already embedded in the ordinance in section 3 relative to the site development plan. And then it's page 17 where I referenced the landscaping components and the tree preservation.
Okay. And then my last comment, it's not really a question. Well, let me ask it as a question to our city attorney. You know, we've had several comments from residents about this topic, and we've had some from the commission, and it relates generally to what I would classify as quality control of a development that is going to be maintained through an HOA that is essentially the development. And I don't know that I have to think about this a little more. Whether it's maintained by the HOA, by people who live there, as we typically think of those, or someone who built it and is renting it, they both have financial interests. So I don't know that one or the other has. I think we could all agree that both of them have, at least to some degree, an incentive to keep the property in good order. That said, however, and I guess this is a question to the city attorney, if this were approved, could it be approved with condition that the city will require, and I don't know if it's a great idea or possible to have city representation on the HOA. So in lieu of that, could we have, if this is approved, a condition that it's approved with the requirement that there will be some sort of an agreement? We could either do a written agreement, or we could embed it as part of the approval by the commission of the development, that we would set forth specific standards, both structural, aesthetic, and so forth. We can fill in the blanks that this development would need to maintain prospectively. And if the city will annually or biannually inspect, and if we note any issues with that in terms of those things not being done, we would alert the HOA, which is the developer, and they would have X number of days to rectify. Can we do that in either or both of those situations, either by written agreement or by including it as part of the approval process for this?
I don't believe we could impose a development specific property maintenance requirement. However, I would point out that the city does currently have in its code generally applicable requirements for the operations of an HOA, as well as property maintenance standards that would still be enforceable against the owner of the property or the occupant of the property on this development.
What about a written agreement?
In terms of that agreement being a zoning condition, I think it unlikely.
I can see you need time to think. So what I would say is, so what I would say, if this gets approved, I would ask that we, when it, well, before I say that, procedurally, where are we tonight? You're looking for a motion, if this is agreeable to the commission, to move forward with it?
Yes, the department has presented a favorable recommendation based upon the conditions in attachment B. It would seek a motion either to approve, deny, or approve with modification.
Okay, and if that motion is made, then would you come back with the formal legislation?
The letter of recommendation, which is your final action, and then ultimately goes to city council.
Okay, so if that motion is made, seconded, and approved, I would ask that as a condition of that, we have the department come back to the commission with a plan relative to the current rules that Mr. Young mentioned relative to oversight of the project, and potentially what changes may need to be made to those, if any, to alleviate concerns that have been expressed in this regard by the residents and some members on the commission. I think that would be something that would be very beneficial and give comfort to many. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Helfrey.
Mr. Vintage, I'm going to go back to one of the things that I asked you about earlier, and that was the drainage problems. And it's kind of sticking in my head because when our neighborhood was built, some things were handled, and I, to this day, have some drainage issues on my property. So I'm very sensitive to that. And I guess I didn't quite understand your answer. So it's the errors on my part. When I asked you about the drainage, you did say that the grading would be up to the property line, but how can we ensure in something of this instance that it isn't going to cause the abutting properties, wherever they are, problems from drainage, roof runoff, springs that come up, whatever? How can we, is there a way we can build that into the design? Because it can be quite problematic.
Well, to just draw a quick comparison, in your particular instance, in your subdivision, the new requirements of the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District, as well as the city's requirements, were not in place. At that time, back in the late 1990s, MSD was still plying with a set of regulations, in the opinion of the department, that weren't very good. And ultimately, that was proven by the adoption of what is currently applied. Secondly, the developer in your instance went into default, and the escrow that was available had to go to, I guess, not more important improvements, but completing streets and sidewalks, curbs and gutters, and some of the other major stormwater improvements itself. So from that perspective, maybe a little different here. What I will tell you is that there is no 100% guarantee that the stormwater generated by this particular property may not cause an impact. As you know, we get storms now that have 3, 4, 5 inches in a very short duration, and they overwhelm even the best designed systems and cause problems downstream on abutting properties. What I guess I can guarantee you is the standards are better. We've been working with our watershed erosion task force for 3+ years. We know the problems and we know how to diagnose them better. And in the recommendation report, we basically have added everything we think we can to ensure, or at least as much as possible, guarantee that stormwater will be managed in an appropriate way.
Thank you.
If I could,
Yeah, go ahead.
if I could just add to that, thank you. I'm not an engineer and not familiar with the intricacies of this development as to this subject matter, but it's at least plausible that the development might give us the opportunity to rectify what could be current issues or future issues that, if we're not in a position of putting conditions and so forth, could actually get worse. And again, I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying it's potential.
Well, certainly that's something we hear occasionally from the development community through their engineers, is that they can address problems oftentimes because there are no standards or requirements or improvements in place to manage stormwater. I'm not necessarily, as the mayor said, identifying this as that instance. But again, between the two entities, we hope we can provide an appropriate stormwater management plan that'll handle 90% of what happens.
Commissioner Rubis.
Etherton Road has on-street parking. And in the report, if on-street parking is proposed, the minimum width of the roadways has to be 26.1 feet. That allows for on-street parking on one side of the street under the fire code and City of Wildwood requirement. And I believe there are some on Main Street as well. Up the So a couple of things. In each instance, there is a 2-car garage associated with each of the individual units. Generally speaking, it's all rear entry, and in some instances under the living space of the dwelling. And then there also is the driveway or the driveway aprons, which would accommodate in some instances an additional 2 cars. Again, there is allowable on-street parking if the width of the public right-of-ways are the street or roadway is 26.1 feet. And then on the strip map the city's developing with its engineering consultant for this particular area of Main Street extension, I believe we did show, took it off, okay. We had on-street parking on Main Street for a while, but we preferred the green strip and we wanted to widen the medians to the maximum extent, which removed the on-street parking on Main Street.
On that main street there, that I don't know what that's called, Warith Street. It looks like there's a couple parking spaces there, and it looks like there's a couple on Parnell Street. So I count 14 with one. I don't know if that's handicapped or not, but I count
Plus
14.
Etherton Road.
Where Etherton?
There's
Okay.
Yeah, the boundary line, that solid black line kind of, it makes it difficult to see, but there they are.
Okay, so 14 plus, okay.
So each unit potentially has 4 spaces, 2 in an enclosed structured garage, 2 in the parking apron, and then the additional parking provided as identified on Etherton Road and then the internal streets.
Commissioner Jackson?
When is Main Street forecasted to be connected and?
Well, we're starting our budget process for fiscal year 2024, and I believe Main Street will be one of the items. Etherton Road and Main Street will be 2 of the items that will be predominant in the discussions of capital improvements for not only 2024, but for the 5-year plan.
So one last, just reading the room here. If this does not pass, are they going to go back to the drawing board, or just, I guess, a question for you, if it doesn't pass, to the builders?
Well, certainly, this is the second attempt in the case of Mr. Bosworth. He had I believe, a 12-lot plan for detached single family that wasn't approved by city council. Obviously, it would be a disappointment to them too. More importantly, though, is we're looking at an alternative to the Crestview project, because if we don't get the right of way we need here, we're going to have to figure out a way to either build a portion of the road through the Crestview project, or again, as mentioned, I don't believe the Crestview project would be suitable without the Main Street extension.
I just heard a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, the density, the rental, HOA, I don't even know why it's even called an HOA, you control it, but among others, I'm thinking maybe some further negotiation with Mr. Vunich on the density and et cetera might be warranted. Come back a little bit later. Just my 2 cents reading the room. So.
No.
So, Mr. Jackson, what I would say is our last meeting between the development entity and the Department of Planning was very difficult. Certainly, they made their point that 58 units was consistent with the town center plan, which I could not argue. But again, I would offer that I think we've reached an impasse in terms of density. I had recommended, I should say the department recommended a reduction in 4. They believe that reduction wasn't consistent with the town center plan. So I don't know if there's much to negotiate unless Mr. Bosworth and Mr. Levinson said there is.
Still looking for a motion.
Thank you.
Councilman Brost?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make a motion to accept the department's recommendation.
All right. Mayor Bullen?
Point of clarification, would that be, Mr. Rose, would that be with the understanding that the developer, or I'm sorry, that the department, when it comes back to the commission, will provide, number one, the elevation and details on the Grand Tree issue that I mentioned, and number two, the assessment of the possibility of the city having some sort of regulatory control over aesthetics and ongoing maintenance to ensure the development stays in place in a good order.
I think in part by what Mr. Young said, I think that's already included because it's part of our regulations, but I'm perfectly fine with that being further defined in this particular
And if the
development.
report says that, that's good. I just think it'd be good for all of us in the community to have that.
I'm perfectly fine with that. I don't think we're changing any of the rules there.
Thank you. I'll second the motion.
All right, Mayor Bullen, any further discussion? All right, seeing none, roll call vote.
Commissioner Helfrey,
No.
Commissioner Rubus.
No.
Commissioner Cohn,
Abstain.
Commissioner Broyles,
No.
Commissioner Clayton,
No.
and Commissioner Depler.
No.
Commissioner Depler votes no. Commissioner Jackson,
No.
Chair Beatty,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
and Mayor Bolin.
Yes.
Motion fails. It was. Are all 10 of us here, 6-3. Yeah,
With
correct.
one abstention, yes.
Mhm. All right. Next up, Mr. Vunich, PZ 2-23.
PZ 0-223 Alabar and Caitlin Abdul Hazani. 17575 Thunder Mountain Road, Wildwood, Missouri, 63025, care of ADT Solar and Jessica Pettit. 128 North Park Boulevard, Covington, Louisiana, 70433.
Wait,
On this matter, there are my neighbors and I wish them the best, but I will abstain from this out of respect for my neighbors and they are. So I can't vote in this matter.
Sure. Are you ready for a motion? Oh, I'm sorry.
It'll be brief, I promise. So before the department begins its presentation regarding this request, and just to give the commission a brief update, the department would like to first acknowledge that the proposed regulations that the commission has recommended to the city council are still under consideration by the city council regarding solar energy systems. With that acknowledgement, Mr. Chair, the department has prepared a recommendation report regarding this requested conditional use permit for its solar energy system. I have a slide up on the screen just to remind you of the location. It's highlighted in blue here. You can see Hidden Valley on the north side of the slide. The property is 3.5 acres approximately in size and located on a private street, Thunder Mountain Road. In reviewing the proposed conditional use permit, the department has determined that the proposal does meet the 4 criteria that must be met under the city's current regulations, when also taking into consideration the recommended conditions that are part of its favorable recommendation, which are included in that attachment B of the report. The department thinks it's also important to note that the proposed system would be accommodated if being considered under the proposed regulations. that have been recommended again by the Planning and Zoning Commission and still under review by the City Council. The compliance is met based on the following unique characteristics of the subject site and the proposal itself. The property is rural in character on a private street with a single point of entrance and located near the end of the cul-de-sac. The home is 140 feet away from the property line and approximately 36 feet below the grade of the private street. And there are substantial existing mature vegetation that provides substantial screening of the home, even in the winter months to some extent. And lastly, the department just wants to note that in its recommendation and the conditions associated with it, the design of the panels would be required to have that symmetrical design with no more than 4 corners, as well as requirements that there be critter guards or some kind of skirting material around the mounting of the panel, which are again recommended as part of the regulations, proposed regulations. And with that, in conclusion, the department is recommending the Planning and Zoning Commission support this requested conditional use permit based on the reasons listed in the presentation as well as its report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to make a motion that the application be approved. And I'd like to give my reasons. First of all, we do have a department recommendation in favor of it. That includes subdivision approval. We also have a similar development or similar application that was approved not far from theirs. The minimal visibility of it is also an added feature. And so I think I was the individual on the commission that made the motion to postpone this, if my memory serves me correctly. So the question would be what's changed? What's changed is, and this hasn't been made public yet, it will in short order. We did, as I think someone noted earlier, Mr. Vintage, maybe obtain a survey of our residents relative to front-facing solar panels. Those results have now come in. And again, they'll be public in short order, but in any event, that's what's changed. So that is my motion that it be approved for those reasons.
I'll second that.
Back to the new ordinance.
It will not. That would be a question for the city attorney, but I don't think it will.
It has no impact on it.
Yeah, we just, okay, I thought we just approved it, but if front facing, that would be, that it won't change anything.
The new ordinance, which is under consideration, has no bearing on this particular application at this time.
Not on this application, but in the future is what you're saying, Mayor, is that the new.
Stop it.
Okay.
It was recommended by the commission. It didn't.
Okay, thank you.
With a motion pending, it really wouldn't be appropriate at this time.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
If I could interrupt with your permission. Tonight's vote is on the information report prepared by the department. The applicant and any representative of the applicant will have the next approximately 4 weeks to review the conditions and then can identify if there are some that are problematic. And then at the October meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission will take final action. So this doesn't necessarily head to City Council for next week.
All right, thank you. All right, any further discussion? All right, seeing none, roll call vote.
Commissioner Rubus,
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Cohn,
Yes.
Commissioner Broyles,
Yes.
Commissioner Clayton,
Yes.
Commissioner Depler,
Yes.
Commissioner Depler votes yes, Commissioner Jackson,
Abstain.
Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes.
Chair Beatty,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
and Mayor Boland.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you. All right, Mr. Newberry, let's see here. PZ 21 and 22-2.
I'll read the whole thing on this one, if that's okay. A recommendation report from the Department of Planning regarding the acceptance of a set of alleys that were platted as private, which are part of the Windsor Crest subdivision, PZ 21 and 21A-02 and 22-02 Windsor Crest, care of McBride and Son Homes, with said review being consistent with the requirements of Chapter 89 zoning and planning of the revised statutes of Missouri when the city considers acceptance of major capital improvements, Ward 1.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vunich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, tonight for your consideration, the department has prepared a letter with recommendation regarding the request to convert the private alleys that are part of Windsor Crest subdivision to public or public maintenance forever. As was discussed during public participation, this particular item was one of the first considerations of the Town Center Update team when it did its 10-year review of the plan. As part of that review, ultimately, the Town Center Update team recommended that any existing alleys become public and any future alleys be public. That particular recommendation was presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission shortly thereafter and was adopted, and ultimately City Council endorsed and ratified the update of the plan, which was inclusive of this particular component. Tonight, the department is recommending that the Planning and Zoning Commission endorse and approve the conversion of the alleys from private to public. In the report, it identifies the rationales for this recommendation, starting with state statute, the city's master plan, specifically the amendment to the master plan, which is the Town Center Plan, city policy, which is being adhered to by the subdivision relative to acceptance of private streets, alleys for public purposes. And then finally, just the practicality of the situation. In this particular instance, these alleys were designed, constructed, and maintained in accordance with the Town Center Plan and new urbanism, meaning that for the most part, they are like public streets in terms of all aspects, except they were privately dedicated at the initial platting of the subdivision. Therefore, again, the department is recommending a favorable recommendation tonight for the commission's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Any discussion or a motion? Commissioner Rubis.
Actually, in anticipation of the vote of the commission and ultimately city council, the homeowners association has been making repairs to the alleys. And for the most part, the department believes they are in a suitable condition for acceptance at this time.
Hey, Joe, I apologize for interrupting, but I could not hear what the commissioner had asked. Sorry.
Ms. Steppler, Mr. Rubis had questioned if the alleys are in an acceptable condition, meaning is the asphalt in good shape? Are there any potholes or any alligator cracking, things like that? And the department answered, they've been working on them and I believe they're in a good condition.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate you reiterating that for me.
My pleasure, ma'am.
All right, Commissioner Clayton. All right, second by Commissioner Broyles. Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote.
Commissioner Depler,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubis,
Yes.
Commissioner Cohn,
Yes.
Commissioner Broyles,
Yes.
Commissioner Clayton,
Yes.
Chair Beatty,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
and Mayor Bull. Thank you.
All right, motion carries. Thank you. All right, next, Mr. Vunich, PZ 17-23.
PZ 17-23, Kathy and Stephen Johnson, 303 Wardenburg Farms Drive, Wildwood, Missouri, 63005.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Mr. Newberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the department has prepared for your consideration tonight a recommendation report regarding an outdoor game court. As many of the commission members are aware, Mr. Rubus, all outdoor game courts in the city of Wildwood have to be reviewed and acted upon by the Planning and Zoning Commission. In this instance, the petitioner is proposing to build a 30 by 60 pickleball court on a 3-acre property in the Wardenberg Farms subdivision. I've got a slide up here and I'll go through a few as I speak. The property is located in this subdivision that is gated, one of the few gated communities in Wildwood. And the pickleball court is proposed to be located in the backyard there to the west in this slide. And again, is to be a pickleball court. The court is going to be screened by the large home on the property from the private street and will be placed again entirely behind the home. The department is not recommending that the commission require any additional landscaping or netting, given the placement of the court in proximity to the property lines, and the issue of projectiles exiting the property onto neighboring properties doesn't seem to be here in this instance. The department also like to note that 2 of the neighbors in the subdivision had submitted comments not in support of the court. In conversations with the trustee, the president of the homeowners association, that negative support, although they didn't say it in their comments, it was, we believe, based on the proposal of a light fixture being part of the court and the court being lit. The department's recommendation is not based on a plan that had any lighting associated with it. So no lighting is planned, and that's been confirmed by a conversation over the weekend with the homeowner as well. So no lighting is proposed in association with the outdoor game court. And in conclusion, the department is recommending approval of the proposed pickleball court at this location with a few conditions that are outlined in its report. The first is that an engineer plan be provided to show the grading and the placement of the court so that we can address any stormwater concerns and verify the placement of the court is in the appropriate location. And then the department's also recommending that the setback, the side yard setback, the southern boundary line that you see on this slide, be increased from the minimum 30 feet to a 50-foot setback, which would put it in more line with the existing swimming pool and even provide better screening from the street and address some concerns that the department hears about noise associated with pickleball courts. And in conclusion, the department is recommending approval, again, with a small set of conditions. And with that, we're available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Commissioner Helfrey.
So Mr. Newberry, is the HOA, are they saying no to it? Are they saying yes to it? Or
no, Ms.
does it
Silver,
matter?
in this instance, we always seek the input from the HOA. And the president had provided an email via the property owner that the homeowners association supports the approval of the outdoor game court pending any items from the city, as is typical. The comments I referenced were submitted via the online comment form and in response to postcards that were mailed. And yeah.
Thank you. Then I'm going to make a recommendation to approve the
All right.
city's recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner Helfrey, second by Commissioner Clayton. Any further discussion? Commissioner Cohn?
Couple of questions. One, what's the size of the lot?
The lot is just over 3 acres.
It's over 3.
Yeah.
And tell me, you mentioned something about noise. How is the department going to handle the impact of the noise of the pickleball court?
Well, let Mr. Vunish weigh in if he'd like, but the intent here was to increase the setback again from that minimum 30 feet and increase it to 50 foot to further remove the court from the property line and be more internal to the site. I'd also remind the commission that there's no neighbor to the north. To the north is Wild Horse Creek Road. The only neighbor is to the is directly to the south that abuts this property, and then across the street as well. And the across the street, the home is a very large home and would likely provide ample noise buffer there. But Joe has anything to add?
I saw in the comments, one of them is the neighbor across the street who I guess said they own 2 lots. Is that because of the size of their home? They had to buy 2, or is Do you not?
I'm not sure of that
Oh, okay.
specific situation that they obviously opted to buy two. So
Commissioner Jackson?
Yeah, it's 3 acre lot, so I'm gonna assume they're on septic and not public, not waste MSD.
Actually, the subdivision immediately to the west, Pine Creek, it has public sewer. So I believe Wardenburg Farm is on public sewer.
So that was on public too. It had no bearing to how I would vote, but I was gonna warn the landowners if you're digging up your septic system, if you're back there, so I was gonna warn them. But anyway,
Yeah.
when it had
If you
problems-
look at the map, that subdivision is completely surrounded by a more high density one that I gotta think is on public.
Yeah, I had no bearing on the vote. I was just gonna kind of point that out if your septic system runs. Thanks.
Commissioner Rubis?
I don't believe so, and I didn't see them on Zoom when I was at my computer there.
All right.
But I've the department's had conversations with them, so if you'd like to pose a question, I could do my best to answer. The department can't address the relationship between the neighbors, so.
And this isn't gonna affect my vote either, but they aren't gonna do any fence at all.
They did not plan any fencing, and I do have some photographs of the site that I failed to show you. This is standing where the fencing associated with the in-ground swimming pool was looking to the west. There's a utility easement that runs through the area there. This is standing looking to the south. There's some existing landscaping there. This is standing farther to the north end of the court area and looking again to the south. And this is looking to the south and the west. And then this is standing beyond that landscaping on the south end, looking towards the north. The fencing on the side you see there is the associated with the in-ground swimming pool. And so to answer your question, Mr. Chair, they did not propose any fencing.
I'm just thinking about when I play tennis, I would not want to put a court in without a fence, but that's just me. Maybe they're better than I am. But in any further questions or comments? Yeah, we did, Commissioner Clayton. Yeah, roll call vote.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubis,
Yes.
Commissioner Cohn,
Yes.
Commissioner Broyles,
Yes.
Commissioner Clayton,
Yes.
Commissioner Depler.
Yes.
Commissioner Depler votes yes. Chair Beatty,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
Mayor Boland is absent.
All right, motion carries 9-0. Thank you. All right, let's see here. Next, we have a recommendation report from the nominating committee for the slate of officers for the upcoming year 2023-2024. Mr. Vunich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the commission, the nominating committee met on August 22nd, had a very brief discussion, less than 5 minutes, and nominated a slate of Mr. Beatty as continuing as chair, Mr. Cohn continuing as vice chair, and Ms. Helfrey continuing as secretary. There were no other nominations from the floor, and the vote was unanimous. Tonight, the department is respectfully requesting a motion to approve the nominating committee's recommendation. Thank you.
So moved.
All right, all right. Motion by Commissioner Jackson, seconded by Commissioner Broyles. I guess we roll call vote.
Discussion.
Oh, yeah.
I would like
discussion.
to point out, I offered that and the city attorney would not allow us to do it without a nominating committee. I'm glad we got there. Thank you.
All right. Roll call vote.
Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubis,
Yes.
Commissioner Cohn, Commissioner Broyles,
Thank you. Yes.
Commissioner Clayton.
Yes.
Commissioner Depler,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Chair Beatty.
Yes.
And Councilmember Brost.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Congratulations to the three of you.
I would just like to make a comment, and that is that when I read the instructions of my job, it says that I can put almost every single thing in the hands of the planning department, so I really don't have to do anything. Thank you.
But we know you don't do that. You're a tireless worker on the minutes.
Commissioner Conrad.
Just a question, what happens as to term limits? If an officer is termed out, I mean, for instance. When does this start in January?
You're here for
Actually,
life.
No, there's term limit
The term starts at the next meeting.
at the next meeting.
Yes, that would be.
Do I have a
October.
year left?
Well, then we'll do, according to the bylaws, there's a process to basically replace an officer. So. Thank you for your service.
How long I have? Because I'm on it, and we have term limit. We have term limits, so at some point, I'm gone. The end.
I don't know. We have a roster that shows appointments and expirations and then reappointments for many of you. We'll send that out tomorrow so you can all see it.
Yeah. I believe you're on through next summer. At least. But I only say that because I've got 2 years.
Yes. We're all in line. We just don't know where.
In April, yeah. Mhm. Is it? He is. Well, yeah, but they can't replace us before our term is up. Unless we resign, yeah. Yeah. Commissioner Helfrey.
I know that we have one more thing, but since it's kind of on this track, I would just like to put it out there into the universe that it sure would be nice if we could move these meetings to 6:30 instead of 6. I know that we got earlier and earlier and earlier, and so it's just, that's me, that's my ask. So maybe that's someplace we can have a discussion at some point in the future. And I'm not trying to make you all stay here longer because I do realize that you pretty much live here, so. It would just be nice if we could see Cindy in person.
Right.
Mr.
Commissioner, yeah, Mr. Vunich.
If there was a motion, second and voice vote, we could put it on the agenda for discussion at a future meeting.
Well, then I'd make a motion to just put it up for discussion at a future meeting.
All right, seconded by Commissioner Clayton. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Your
Thank
motion carries. All right, and Mr. Vunich, since you're standing, even though it has Mr. Newberry on here.
Well, I'll defer and I'll go sit in my chair.
All right. Mr. Newberry?
Mr. Chair, I'll be very brief. And the department and along with the chair and the commission identified an issue relating to the bylaws needing to be amended in one of its sections to address the commission now only consistently meeting once per month as it relates to the nomination of the officers. So the department is presenting for your consideration an amendment to address the timing of the nomination for officers to reflect that new schedule. And is respectfully requesting a motion, second and vote to approve that amendment, or if there are any changes that need to be made, please
So
let us know.
moved. All right, motion by Commissioner Jackson, second by Commissioner Clayton. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain?
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you. And I guess we get to adjourn now. Oh, Mr. Vunich.
Just one last thing. We don't meet before September 23rd again. September 23rd is Celebrate Wildwood. We hope you all can attend. We have a lot scheduled in terms of activities, both for young and old and everywhere in between. Good music, good food, good drink. So we hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you.
What? I'm sorry. Yes, the book, The History of Wildwood is available. And I bought the $55 one because I wanted a hard copy.
So that's what I've been seeing on those banners around Manchester Road.
Yes. It's quite an accomplishment.
So
I'll be proud.
if you're done, I'm going to make a motion, but before I do, a shout out that you guys may not know, but we have fans in Long Beach, California and Tulsa, Oklahoma. So shout out to Liv and Jamie that religiously watch the Wildwood Planning and Zoning. And I make a motion to adjourn.
Second motion by Commissioner Jackson, second by Commissioner Helfrey. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, we are.